This is the Sexual 5 panel. Welcome to the Art of Growth, where we use the Enneagram and the best tools we can find to help you transform. And welcome to our series of 27 panels looking at the 27 subtypes in the Enneagram. Subtype is when you combine the dominant type with the dominant instinct. And this week we are talking to our Type 5 panels. If you have yet to discover your subtype, you can take our free instincts test at www.theartofgrowth.org, and that test will reveal your instinctual sequence, your dominant, your secondary or neutral, and your repressed, neglected, or resisted instinct. And the point of all of this is to move towards integration. The integration of the instincts is part of the redemptive process. If you don't know your Enneagram type, you can take our free Enneagram test at theartofgrowth.org as well. And you can also find out about all of our work there, from group coaching, individual coaching, or exploring options about having us come in and work with your companies, because it is just fantastic how many companies are waking up to the return of investment on having a more emotionally intelligent work environment, and how that can change the culture to be more efficient and effective, and importantly, enjoyable. At the end of this Instinct series in May, we are going to have a live Q&A event, so stay tuned to find out about that, or sign up for the newsletter at our website so you can grab a ticket and join us when that becomes available. So we look forward to hearing from you. But for now, my friends, let's get into today's episode with our Sexual 5 panel.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the Sexual 5 podcast. I am so excited to have each of you. We've been going through all of these subtypes. So far, it's been an incredible journey. So we're going to complete 27 podcasts in a short amount of time. The reason why we're doing this is because we're trying to learn more about how each of the types expresses themselves through the instinct, and it looks different. And that's what's really fascinating, is to learn from self-pres 5s and then sexual 5s and social 5s, and the similarities and then the really remarkable differences as well. And so as we begin, would you just first of all introduce yourself and tell us where you are from?
My name is Travis, and I am originally from Brooklyn, but I live in Atlanta, Georgia currently.
My name is Keith. I used to live in California, and I'm currently residing in Phoenix.
I'm Karina, and I live in Surrey.
And I am Stephen. I live currently in Philadelphia, but grew up and down the East Coast between Baltimore and Boston.
Well, welcome to each of you. Thank you again so much for being on this podcast. We're talking about the 5 and the 5 sort of core need, which gets languaged differently depending upon who you speak with, but somewhat has to do with the need for being resourced to face the world, and tending to do that from the head center, like needing to gather information, to understand, to kind of get a sense of what the reality, the facts are, and to feel resourced in that way. And then how that interplays with the instincts. And we're talking about the sexual instinct, and there are 3 aspects of it. So the first one is that sort of risk-taking, the ability to produce or bring change and not to stay the same, to move things forward. And then the second one has to do with broadcasting and attracting, to sort of put yourself out there, using sometimes charm to draw people and to make connections in that way. And then thirdly, it's the immersion or fusion. And that's that deep sort of interconnection between you and another person. There's sort of this energy exchange that's really wonderful, and generally not so much about the topic that's being talked about. Of course, that's part of it. It's very interesting to have a conversation about mutual interests, but it's that energy exchange that's really the life-giving juice for that part of the instinct. And it can also be projects that immersion will take place into. It's not just people, but sometimes like immersing yourself in something super interesting to you. Let's start with the first one and talk about how this need for being resourced shows up, interacts with this aspect of risk-taking, going out there and bringing change and pushing yourself to bring change, and so on. So love to hear from you on that. Who would like to start?
I find it to be almost a constant tension between wanting to push and wanting to expand and needing to prepare at the same time. I want to push the boundaries. I need the intensity. I need the energy, but I also need to prepare. And then I need to go back into my little cave at the end of the day.
I would say for me, when I am feeling spent or empty or disconnected, what is really energizing for me is throwing some idea out there and seeing if I can get connection from somebody. So it could be I'll post some crazy idea on Twitter to see if I can get somebody to interact with me, or I'll throw something out in a conversation with my wife or a friend. Like, I get energized by pushing whatever boundary to see if I can find a connection with somebody else. And it might not even be something I feel that strongly about, but if I think, gosh, this might generate a response, it will then lead to a connection with somebody. And that connection then is energizing for me.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, I would probably agree with you on that one. I kind of picture my world of knowledge as like a spear, and I'm reaching out into the world to find different colors that I can apply to the spear. And that's like, honestly, like energizing me. Because like I already know a certain amount of information about this particular topic, but maybe your perspective on it is going to set some new insight to it. So now I get to relook at the spear that I have in like a million different ways. And to me, that's like very energizing. And also what you were saying, Keith, in regards to like kind of pushing the boundaries. I know for myself, like I am working to be a coach for a polyamorous community. And I want to do that full time. And I've been dedicated to it and researching it and da-da-da. But I don't necessarily want to I don't want to tell people that I am a coach until I have all my certification and I've reached out to a certain amount of people. And I know my clientele is coming towards me at a particular time.
Until you have the backing to be able to.
Yeah. I need a certification. I need to know I have those resources and tools to go out there. Even though I'm confident myself, it's not really about the lack of confidence in myself. It's really just more of having something to back up to if things don't go well.
I think with me, my risk taking was more of a little demon on my shoulder. So I didn't want to take risks, but I pushed myself into situations because I felt almost driven to do it. And it conflicted with me, especially when I was younger. I had this big turmoil. So I would put myself into situations and not think about things, because if I thought about it, then it wouldn't happen. And it probably shouldn't have happened.
Because there's an interesting tension that lives within the instinct and the type, or that lives between those two. And that oftentimes happens with what some Enneagram teachers call the counter type of the type. So, in the case of the 5, the sexual 5 would be the counter type of the 5. And that's a sort of a broad term, but there are aspects of the instinct when it meets up with the type that creates this sort of countering effect, or, pulling against the type's energy or pushing against the type's energy. And that sexual piece of risk-taking tends to do that, it sounds like, with the 5. So, and yet there's something in you that says, and yet the desire, like you were saying, Stephen, is I put stuff out there because the energy I get from that exchange does give you energy. I hear from other sexual 5s who say, and then it drains me. Afterwards, I do need to, go back and recharge the batteries.
I like the cave thing. Go back into my cave.
Go back into my cave for a week and not talk to anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find for me, as long as my putting something out there, I get a response that sort of validates, yes, you're capable and competent, then that energizes me. It's when I take that risk of, hey, maybe we can connect on this, and I end up feeling like, oh, I didn't come across well. I look like I don't really know what I'm talking about. Then there's absolutely this sort of retreat. I gotta go back and get more information and do my research better, so that next time I put something out there, I'll have the resources to do that. My wife tells me often I don't think enough before I take risks. She's a social 6, and so she is very committed to not violating social norms and feels safer when she's kind of behaving the way people expect. And for me, as a sort of iconoclastic sexual 5, I want to go out and violate norms and see what happens and make connections. And we often will talk afterwards about, hey, Stephen, you maybe should have thought more before you took that risk. But there's something about the instinct that it pushes me to do it.
It's pretty consistent across sexual types, by the way. So this is what's interesting, is that across sexual types, there's a tendency to do things that sometimes violate social norms for that sizzle, for that energizing exchange, the potential of that, the possibility of that. Let's talk about the predictability, the need oftentimes that 5s will describe about themselves as needing some measure of predictability in their lives. And when you need sort of predictability and some kinds of routines in your life, how does that interplay then with change and the desire also to produce change, not to stay stagnant in your life? I see sexual 5s that will both like entrepreneurial spirit, like I want to start something new, but then at the same time that there's need for predictability and some kind of processes that help to ground the 5. So talk about that interplay between the two of those.
Well, I find that if I have a measure of predictability, it allows me to feel safe and go out and do something new. As in, if I don't have the predictability, if I don't have my routine set up right, I won't have the energy, or I will feel like I don't have the energy to take on something new.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you, Keith, on that. I definitely have my routine that I do every single day, and it looks probably boring to a lot of people. But I know on the weekend, this is a time where I can take risks and just do whatever, because I just know that I have my routine that I'm going to go back to on Monday. That's going to rejuvenate me. So that kind of just what I was saying before. Just knowing that I can fall back on, like you said, Joel, a predictability makes taking risks so much easier.
And I also find that if my routine gets messed with, then I shut down.
Oh, yes, completely. Yeah. You have to reevaluate, how can I reestablish this routine? Do I need to make a new one?
I crave change. I like things to change, but I tend to do the same thing over and over and over again. And then suddenly it's bam, change everything up, move where I'm living, change jobs, change career, change everything. I have to do it.
Really?
I have to just jump and do it. And and at the moment, everything's been a bit stagnant for a few years. I can't change because I have to be stable. And I find I'm really craving it. I really want to do something.
Like what?
I don't know. Maybe up and move again. I don't know. Just anything. Start again, start fresh, go somewhere where nobody knows me. I don't have to do all this stupid small talk with everyone. And
yes.
Sorry, that sounds rude, but it's just, when you just, I know so many people, but I don't know many people, and I hate all the hellos, how are you? It just, yes, when no one knows me, I can go and start fresh and dig in my own hole somewhere. I love that.
Yeah, Karina, there's a lot of that I resonate with. I do like routine, but every so often I have to throw out the old routine and create a brand new routine. And I, whether it's once a year or whatever, okay, I've been doing these habits and even, they work really well for me, but now they're tiresome now. I need a new set of habits. I need new routines. And so I will create a good system for myself and it'll work for a while. And then I get bored and I need a new routine because otherwise I feel stuck in a rut.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so funny because me relating and saying that to so many of my friends is why people think I'm a 7 initially, because I have tried so many things and I tried them very intensely. But the thing is that once I try something new, I set a particular time with it and I'm very routine with it. For example, when I work, I've changed, I used to work out at the gym and I did that for 3 months. I was fairly diligent about it. And then I switched to doing home workouts and I did that for a period of time. I don't really jump back and forth too frequently. It's when I'm dedicated to that one thing, I'm dedicated to that one thing. And then once I'm done with it, I am so done with it. And I just move on to the next thing.
I relate to that. Once I get an interest, I go deep into it. And then once I'm done with it, I'm done with it. And I really don't want to see it again for at least a year.
Yes.
There's a part of the 5 that's also very interesting that is oftentimes talked about is the seeking something unconventional, the seeking of something outside, it's funny. I'll hear a 5 talk about, I went to, when I was in France, I went wandering one day and I ran into this little cafe way off of the, and that was like the real highlight, was finding something off the beaten path, something unconventional, something different. So I can see how that would play in with the risk taking and the desire to experience change. Do you see that too? Am I making a connection that's not really there? Is there sort of like I need to, both the risk that's within me driving me, but also the seeking of something, if it's too mundane, if it's too average or too run of the mill, like the same thing, everything all the time, then that can become really tiresome and not interesting. And again, interest is a big head thing. So 5, 6s, and 7s, we seek what's interesting.
Yeah, I would say, Joel, that's certainly true for me. I don't like rules. I don't like following somebody else's prescribed method for doing something. I'm an investigator, so I like to find out what other people's rules are. And then I can use that to improvise my own way of doing something and say, well, I might pull a little of this and a little of that, and then flavor it with my own unique thing. And that's what I want to do. So yeah, that totally resonates with me.
So Stephen, would you say that rules are so you know that what other people are going to do?
It's some of that, Keith. I feel like rules are the lines that people expect you to color in. And I really prefer to color outside the lines. So it's nice to know, okay, this is what people expect, but I'm not going to do it. So it's nice to know what they think I should do, but I'm going to do something different.
I guess on the interest idea, I don't have to be different. I just find that my interests are different than the majority of people. I'm just doing what I like to do. Not necessarily I have to be different, or I enjoy being different. I'm just doing what interests me. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't.
Yeah, I agree with that. I always had different interests and lots of kind of esoteric things, even as a teenager. And it wasn't that I sought things out. It's just that everything I seemed to do was different to everybody else I knew. So yeah, I didn't do it intentionally. It just happened to be.
I'm the same way as well. Like, for example, right now, the way I approach relationships is as a solo polyamorous, which is like an individual who just prefers to be a third or fourth or fifth to a couple. And I don't ever really want to have a primary partner. And to like explain that to people, they're just like, that's so odd. Like, why would you want to do that? And I was like, I'm not trying to be odd. It's just like how I just prefer to have relationships. Even just like my natural lifestyle day to day, it's just like kind of just doesn't follow the norm. And it's not to like be the exception or anything, but it's just like I see what other people do. I'm going to take that and just personalize it for me and like what I like to do.
It's interesting, the way the three of you just said that, Keith, Karina, Travis. For me, the tension is, I like to do like what interests me, and I want to do the thing that I like to do. But then I'm pulled by the sexual desire for fusion. It's like, I don't want to do what other people do because they do it, but I also don't want to be completely alone. Like I want to find another weirdo to fuse with. Like I want somebody else that also likes the weird stuff that I do just because I like it.
That is so helpful to hear you say it that way. That was a question. I'm so glad you answered, because that was a question on my mind, is like you do your thing because it's interesting to you, regardless of whether it's interesting to anybody else. But then there's also the risk piece, or the desire for, and we're going to get to that, the immersion, the fusion, the connection with other people. And so you're going to throw something out there sometimes to see, is there, throw a fishing line out there. Does anybody bite on this idea, on this thing that I'm posting on social media, on this? There's a seeking still for connection. And so definitely want to get to that, particularly when we get to broadcasting and attraction, which is next. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how, maybe say more about that there's still the desire for broadcasting and putting yourself out there. Not one thing we want to make clear. It doesn't mean that just because sexual is your dominant doesn't mean that all three aspects you have as an equal share within you. There may be two of them that, usually are dominant, and the other third one maybe a little less so. So if that's the case, please say so. But talk to me about broadcasting and attraction and how that plays itself out in you as a 5.
Awkwardly.
Awkwardly.
I would agree with that.
Well, say more. Say more about that, Karina.
I just feel, you talk about sexual, charismatic. I have no charisma. Yeah, I think it's grown with age, but when I was younger, I just felt so awkward in my own skin. I felt really unattractive, really tall and skinny. And I look back now and I think, my God, you were in your prime. But just really, really awkward with my whole sexuality, with connecting with people. I'd be driven to kind of find this sexual connection, sexual energy, but then I'd feel really uncomfortable with it. And just everything felt really awkward within myself. I think it's taken me a long time to feel comfortable with me.
That resonates deeply with me. But I would say also that my broadcasting attraction is probably the weakest part. The other two zones are much stronger for me. I will say I did put on weight. I ended up going to a Big and Tall store, and basically to go for an interview, I found someone who I believe is a 3, and I had them dress me. It basically make me look good. Here's my money. Here's my budget. Make me look good. And I would do the same thing if I were interested in a date or something like that. Basically use others to make me look good, because I really don't have any knowledge or really desire to go into fashion and attraction and things like that.
I like pretty things. I like clothes. I like fashion. I like hair. But I still felt really unable to connect with me being an attractive, connecting person. So it just didn't, I don't know, something didn't connect properly within me.
I'm really curious about that as it relates to because I think it speaks to a lot of 5s. I've heard lots and lots of 5s feel relatively uncomfortable in their body. So I'm just curious about that. The physical dimension, is that kind of the awkward dimension for it? If not, please say so. Because I mean, this is like, it's really interesting.
It really does feel awkward. Like if people would tell me I was a child, it just made me feel awkward. And I don't want people to look at me at the same time I'm a tall woman. People do. If I've got shoes on, I'm 6 foot or over. I do stand out, and I hate that I'd wear bright pink and then hate that I stood out.
Well, I was going to say, that's probably my strongest one, broadcasting and attraction.
Oh, totally. I was going to say, if you say it's not, I'll tell you about it. I'll tell you out on your bullshit, man.
I am naturally good at charisma. I am naturally good at drawing people to me.
Yeah, you're very good at it. Yes.
Usually the life of the party. It's honestly, I would say when I was younger, I used it very terribly, just in a way of just like you were saying, Keith, before, of just getting people to do stuff for me. I don't really know why that's the case, why it's my strongest. I don't know if it's because I have 5 other siblings, and so I was kind of forced to and the oldest, so I was forced to be out there and take care of other people, or because I'm part of the LGBTQ community, so I've been more in touch with my body, in sexual awakening. I don't know if it's any of those things, but the resource of just attracting other people, if I need something, I'm just going to go in and get it. And the best way I know how to do that is to compliment other people. And I think as an observer and as an investigator, I can observe and investigate what people like and don't like and play to that so I can get exactly what I need, essentially.
You just referred to attracting as a resource.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Huh.
Wow.
Yeah. I could see that.
Wow. Okay.
If I were more skilled in that area, I would probably do the same thing.
Stephen, you're smiling. Is that something?
Yeah, I would say, probably through high school, I still felt somewhat awkward with myself, but it was not, I was relatively young, college age, where I began to realize, hey, I have this ability to attract people to myself. I do have a charisma that I can use to draw people in and make those connections. And it's funny, there are so many people that I know at work and other places who assume that I'm an extrovert because I can hone in on someone and make them feel really good and draw them out and have a deep connection with someone and then turn and do the same thing with someone else. And this sort of charismatic ability to connect with people, that broadcasting and attraction, that charisma that attracts people to me, and I think the way you put it, Travis, is the ability to observe what do I think is going to resonate with this person and be able to lean into that and form that connection. That's something I got good at in college and have used in the whatever it's been 35 years or so since that.
I like that there's difference here on this panel. That Karina, for you, it's like no charisma. I don't, that's great. I'm glad that there's a lot of difference.
I might have charisma, but I don't feel as though I do.
Yeah, no, I would say that's probably true. That I was going to say, I think you do have charisma, but there may be a reaction to the eyes being on you and the discomfort with that for various reasons. But yeah, it's interesting how you're all articulating it, and there are nuances and differences among you. So that's really great to hear that and how that's playing itself out.
I like the way you put it too, Travis, talking about partly your being part of the LGBT community. The broadcasting attraction talks about not editing the self, just a desire to be, hey, this is who I am. I'm going to put this out here. And I think if I put that out here, I'm going to draw other people too. It's draining when I feel like I have to edit myself and I have to find some way to hide some part of myself. Then I feel like, gosh, even if it looks like I'm connecting with other people, I don't feel it because I know I'm editing myself in this context. And what I really want to do is just break down the eggshell and like just be myself out there and connect with people about that. I like the way you frame that, Travis.
That is much more of the sexual energy. So I appreciate you saying that, because for other fives, that may not be the case, but that's really great that you articulate it that way. Let's move on to the third, the immersion and fusion piece. It's interesting how all three of these aspects, they have a purpose to them. It's like, the goal is to have this connection with people, to have this sizzle, this energetic feel that happens within the sexual energy, within the sexual type. And so immersion fusion has to do with this connection with people, but also sometimes even projects or ideas, but it tends more towards that other person. So I'd love to hear how your five works itself out in that sphere, the immersion and fusion.
I was thinking about this earlier today, and I was kind of thinking about the contrast to this. If I'm in a situation where I feel like I, for whatever reason, am not going to be able to deeply connect with this person, and I'm going to have to settle for as a five, what feels like, well, what's the point? If I can't deeply connect, I'm hardly connecting at all. I find going forward, social interactions with that person really draining. If I know we can deeply connect, then I love spending time with that person, talking. There's like, whether it's one topic or a breadth of topics, if I can deeply connect, it's so energizing. If I feel like there's a barrier, we're just not going to get that deep, I almost don't want to bother. It's like, this is draining to be around someone I can't authentically be the sort of quirky self that I am.
It's interesting. That sounds a lot like what you were saying earlier, Karina, which is like, if I have to do the small talk, that really drives me nuts.
I have taught myself to do it now I've got older because it's polite. I do actually care about people, but it is draining. It's really draining just to have the hellos, how are you? It's just, I just feel I want to go home and just be on my own. But I find with relationships, and I have this ideal in my head that nothing quite lives up to. And I think, particularly in romantic relationships, I've done the whole risk factor. I've made really bad choices, and nothing ever quite is as I think it's going to be, or the ideal I think it's going to be, and nothing could ever live up to that because it's not real. So they never do. And I go for the whole excitement thing. It's something that makes you feel kind of like there's risk here, there's scare here, and then that's obviously the bad choice. And I've now been alone for 5 years because I'm not taking any more risk.
That idea of I'm never going to get as close to this person as I want to, as you say, Karina, partly because that's a sort of romantic ideal. It's not necessarily real. Definitely that part of what you said resonated with me.
Part of that's my fault because I kind of throw myself all in, but another part of me always holds back.
Do you know what part that is that holds back for you?
The secret part.
Oh, so the privacy mechanism.
Yeah, it's like there's some bit of me that kind of, even though I kind of throw myself in 100%, that I'm not. I have to kind of keep things.
You have to keep something for yourself.
Yeah, I just can't.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's interesting because it's on one hand, I'm hearing you say, like, I really want the depth and I really want to be able to say everything and be accepted. But would all of you say that there's something you hold back, that there's a part of you that you protect to yourself?
I would agree with it. I was listening to your Sexual 2 podcast, and some of the comments about going deep and I want everything just kind of gave me the willies, and I wanted to back out.
Okay.
Just because that's nice and going deep is nice, but I want to keep a part of me to myself.
They can go deep to me. That's fine. And people do. People confide in me. People I don't even know very well. They feel, which I don't mind at all. I think that's lovely. And tell me things about themselves that I can help them with or talk to them with. But I wouldn't always open up to everyone. I've got to have that real connection to feel it back. And even with somebody I love, I still hold things back.
Yeah, I agree. There's a sense of this, like, because fives understand boundaries so well, the frame of like where we want to be so well, that I think people see that and inspired by that, feel like they can trust us by giving their secrets to us because they know that their secrets are going to fit in this particular box.
Absolutely.
That we live in. And with that, like on the flip side of that, we also would want somebody to also respect our outline of our box as well. And that's what's going to hold us back from like completely giving of our all to other people. Like what we do for others, we would like for someone to do back to us, but not a lot of people are as good at it as we perceive we are good at it. So I think it's that, like, I want you to do what I do for myself, but I don't think that you can or will to my capability, the same way you're saying, Karina, about the high standards.
Totally that one, to the point that some people confuse me because they tell you things when actually they really want you to tell that thing. And I'm like, but if you're telling me I'm not going to tell anyone, it stops here. But really they want you to.
That's funny. That's funny.
That's funny.
That is so funny. So somebody who wants to tell you something as a means to like, I'm hoping you will talk to this, this mutual friend of ours, this coworker or something. It's like, I hope you, and you're just like, it stays with you. It's the end of it. Like,
yeah. And I get that a lot. And I'm just like, no, I've not. Why would I pass that on or talk about it?
Oh man. So triangulation doesn't work with a 5. So that's good. That's news for everybody out there. Do not do that. If you want information to get out there, don't do it. Don't talk to a 5.
And the opposite is also true. If I tell you something in confidence and then it gets blasted out to the world, I'm not going to be interacting with you on anything more than a surface level probably ever again.
Yeah. There's a deep understanding of what boundaries are. As you're saying, if you tell me something, you don't even have to say to me, Stephen, don't tell this to anyone else. It wouldn't occur to me to tell it to anyone else.
Exactly.
And if the same thing, like if I tell you something, I expect that you're not, unless I say, and by the way, it's fine to tell people. Like otherwise, if I tell you something, I assume you're not going to tell it to anyone else. Now, the other thing, just sort of we were talking about a couple minutes ago, this desire for fusion and immersion thing that resonated with me is I think when I was younger, I was really looking for that total fusion, total immersion with another person. And I think part of being at least a little bit more mature is I understand myself to be a multifaceted person. And if I can share some facet of me deeply with another person, I don't have to share all of the facets of me to feel a real connection. But there's got to be something that we can go really deep on, and I'll find somebody else to go really deep about some other thing in my life.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's just what I do. I have particular friends for a particular thing that I go deep with, and I don't necessarily try to crossfade it with anybody else. And that's friendships, that's family. That's why like polyamory works so well with me, because like that's like how it plays out romantically as well.
So you're saying I can put this friend in this box and this friend in this box and this friend in this box. And when I want to access that, I go to that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what's really fascinating with the heart and the head in the 5, is that there's this bridge. So in the traditional diagram of the Enneagram is that at the bottom, we see the 4 and the 5, and they don't connect. What's fascinating is in the 5, it feels like it does have this same existence of both connection in the same body, but also at times that struggle between those two. You talk more emotional with more emotional language than self-preservation 5s do, or than social 5s do. Could you say a little bit about emotions and what's happening, since the sexual energy does tend to pull up a bit more of the emotion in us? How do you handle emotion, and what does that feel like to you? And is it still the same sort of compartmentalization that we might see with other 5s?
I would say as a 5, I think a lot about my emotions.
Me too.
Yeah.
That's well put.
For me anyway, it's not just a linguistic way of trying to fuse and connect with people. I do feel like, I think more so over time, and this, resonates with me, Karina, as you were talking about, as you've gotten older, there's things you feel like you can access differently. I do feel more in touch with my emotions and not just using emotional language to communicate my thoughts. But that is definitely a growing thing for me, of being able to access what I actually feel versus what I think about what I feel.
It's hard to do that. I write things down. I blog. I really have to think about how I'm feeling. And I don't really want to. I don't really want to think about how I'm feeling because I don't want to feel it. Therefore, I run instead. I run a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find running for me is also super helpful for that. I think I access my emotions through my body. I can't directly get to them.
I would agree with that. I use weightlifting for that. It allows me to calm the head down. Basically, my brain starts to shut up and I can do other things.
That makes sense.
And same thing to try and get to sleep at night. If I don't get exercise, then my head is just spinning and spinning and spinning, and I can't sleep.
Since teens, if I didn't work out, go to the gym, as long as it's stuff I do on my own, I don't want people to get in my way.
That's true.
Yeah.
I want to be able to do it on my own. I don't want to have to go to a group class like spin or CrossFit or anything like that. I don't want other people telling me what to do.
Travis, what about you?
I was thinking of like an analogy. I feel like when I first learned about the Enneagram, the one thing that kind of struck me the most was scarcity and the whole mindset. And I feel like for me, the scarcity kind of looks like just like embers in a fire. And that's kind of how I live my life day to day. And I go for the fusion. So just like a spark and like a huge fire that comes up. And I use like physical activities to have that huge spark and have that huge flame. But I have no idea how to keep it going because I just haven't learned how to at all whatsoever. So it kind of dies down back into embers. Back to embers thing, or that and then back down. That's kind of how I see emotions, to be honest. So I like to get sad, or I like to get angry, or I like to get really excited because I feel like there's like that temporary, momentary moment where like the flames get to like burst up, and that like feels really great to me. But I know it's not going to last, so I don't even like try to connect with it, which I should probably get better at. So it's more of just like, oh, that's a cool, the kind of what you're saying, Stephen, where it's like, oh, that was a cool thing. Like, I really like that experience. I'll like investigate it, think how cool it is. And like, oh, this is a weird feeling, but I'll never like really like try to feel it itself. And I feel like when we are working out and like pushing ourselves, like running, that's like when the embers are just kind of like going out. And then we realize we can still go. And I think that's like that moment where like we kind of switch from like scarcity to abundance. Of just like, oh, like I'm running and I can still run. That means I still have energy somewhere, somehow.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And for me, that's like what physical activities do. It's like, because initially I'm thinking like, there's no way I can run this mile. And then like I actually run the mile. I'm like, oh, where did all this energy come from? Or I feel like rejuvenated after the run. I'm like, where did all this energy come from? Like I'm just like not used to like this much energy at all whatsoever. So like doing physical activities like does that for me. So emotions and physical activities kind of like do two separate things for me.
That's really interesting. I love that because I think that's experientially true for me as well. The discovering how there's different energies located within us and finding body energy being different. Like, interesting. I have that same experience. Like, wow, I can do this. I'm exhausted in my mind and I feel like I don't want to do anything. But then I go out and I physically do stuff and I'm like, I've got stamina here. Why is I have physical stamina? So I've had the same thing happen to me as well. And I think it's a great discovery to us that there is more, energy than we think. And it can help us move out of that scarcity mindset. So that's really, really beautiful. Let's move to the neutral instinct. This is the second one in our sequencing. So tell me, which one is it and how do you use it?
Well, for me, it's self-pres, which just seems logical because it seems really illogical. It could be social. That doesn't quite gel. I don't know how it could be, so it wasn't a surprise. I think it does have some negative aspects for me. So it's about taking care of the self. I don't think I really do. I work out, but I work out more for my mind than for my body. And I almost work out to the point that I'm causing myself harm. Like my feet hurt. I've got a really sore foot, but I'll continue to run. I won't stop. I don't eat very healthily. I've studied nutrition. And I drink coffee and eat sugar all the time. I have a really nice, tidy, clean home, but I never have people around because it's invading my space. So it's a weird kind of secondary instinct. I know it should be neutral, but it's not. It's weird.
Okay, good. That's good to hear. I love that you're saying that. I would believe that we call it now the relationship to the instinct as opposed to like, do you have this instinct or do you not? Because your relationship with the instinct is really more interesting and what's happening. So even if it's your second and theoretically the second tends to be more neutral, it may not be for you. And that's an interesting thing to explore.
I don't think it causes as many issues as the social, but Okay.
That is interesting to hear, Karina, because for me, the social is the second, the neutral one. But for me, the social sphere is where I can look for the individuals to connect with. Mm-hmm. And so I can do that broadcasting socially. I love public speaking and that sort of being in that kind of situation where I'm putting out ideas and hopefully at least coming across as competent and capable. And I'm scanning the room as I talk and looking for, there's that person sees what I'm saying. And I have a momentary spark of connection with that person while I'm talking. And so again, I think it's part of why people think of me as an extrovert, because I like putting myself out there in a public sphere and seeing who are the individuals that I connect with out of that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
My secondary is self-pres, and I have a very strong self-pres. I think on your guys' test, my sexual and my self-pres were almost identical, maybe 1 or 2 points different. And I have a more neutral relationship to my self-pres than Karina does, but I agree with a lot of what she says. It's just logical. I like to accumulate resources. I like having a week's or 2 weeks supply of food and water and everything else at home, just so I don't have to go out and get more. The people that I live with were all self-preses, so we didn't experience the rush of getting stuff at the grocery store that everyone else did. We already had stuff tucked away. But I will also say that having a strong self-pres, especially with the 5, causes me to be a little bit more fearful and a little bit more adverse to taking risks than maybe like Stephen with a stronger social, especially in the public sphere.
Yeah, I would say my secondary or neutral is social. Again, it just kind of comes quite naturally to me. From reading some of the stuff about social instinct, just reading and interpreting, I feel like that's kind of where I gather my information. Is mostly from that. I know a lot of 5s don't read books or listen to podcasts or I gather all my information from interactions mostly, and I fact checked it with other people in other cultures and other communities. Just the contribution to others, LGBTQ support groups at church when I used to go to church, and I found that just being easy for me. I wasn't obsessed about it, so I knew it wasn't my primary, and I wasn't annoyed with it, so I knew it wasn't my blind spot. It just felt easy. But all the people I contribute to knew all right, it's 4:00, Travis is out, it's done. But before 4:00, Travis is 100% in this, for you.
Well, seeing you at training for the Enneagram at the same place and seeing how you engaged, even though for you there is like a cap where you're just like, I'm done, I'm out. Like your sustainability in that realm is long compared to a lot of other people. And so I think that makes a lot of sense when you have the sexual plus the social. Same thing with you, Stephen, is that the sexual and the social are very people oriented. So there'll be a bit more sustainability in that dimension, that realm, than say if you're, sexual and then self-pres, where you're going to find your fatigue earlier. You're going to find your limits earlier and then go for resourcing by being alone. So let's talk about the third instinct, which is the one that tends to cause us problems. It's the neglected one or the repressed one, or aspects of it that are very neglected or repressed. Talk about that one. Which one is it? What problems has it caused you? And how are you growing through it?
Okay, well, my third one is the social. And I didn't realize this caused me any issues whatsoever. I thought that was fine. And then I read what you guys wrote was the social and realized how much it does. So I never reach out to people, which I should do. And I do care about them. It just never occurs to me. And if I did contact them, I love it. I really thrive off that energy of people I care about, but it would never occur. I have to force myself to think to do that. I have to think to write to people in emails, not to be blunt, to do the small niceties. I've had to teach myself to do the hellos, and I can't read people. I'm really, really, really bad at really understanding. I take people for face value. I think they're being honest. I can't see a lie. And I can't see when they've got darkness in them. And if anything, I'm attracted to that. So, yeah, I think it's been a really big issue in my life now, looking at it. But I didn't realize it was until I broke down from your thing as to what it actually is.
Yeah, that's interesting because the bonding and affiliating aspect of the social instinct is the one that kind of tunes you into whether or not someone's going to be a safe partner.
If anything, I'm driven to the dangerous ones because it's risk. It's that energy kind of thing that attracts me. And it's, yeah,
that makes sense.
Totally. I've joked about why I've not joked. I mean, I've actually kind of been hard on myself for like looking back at college and wondering, why did I have all the crazies as my friends? Like none of the normal people were my friends. And they're the people that like, I would like to have them as friends now, but it was all the crazies. So it definitely happens with the sexual energy, and particularly with the 5 and that interest in that seeking out things that are fascinating, that definitely accelerates that.
And pretty things, the shiniest, sparkliest, prettiest people. Yeah. I'd always go to them and fuse with them, but they wouldn't necessarily be the nice people. Yeah.
So my self-preservation is my last sort of blind spot. It's interesting because I think I've paired it very well with my sexual instinct. So I don't have a bad relationship with any of them. Like, for example, like my health and my well-being, I'm doing it so I would be attractive. I don't necessarily care to do it because it keeps me healthy.
Yep.
That's interesting.
In the resource management, I am very particular about my time, but I'm also fully not. I could tell myself that I am, but I always find myself double booking all the time. It's so bad. Oh, so bad. And then in regards of money, I just think I have a lot more than I actually do, which is not really great. Or just I'll be able to get more. It's fine. It's whatever.
Yeah.
I'm a very resourceful person. I can get more. And I don't think about that too much. And then just my home, that's such an interesting statement because I grew up in a very poor home, in a very toxic home. And then since leaving home, I've never cared once about having stuff or setting up a particular mood or whatever. I bought my first bed that I didn't take from college a year ago. And that was 7 years ago. I just didn't necessarily care about what I was sleeping on whatsoever. Or I would never invite people over to my house Not because like I don't like people, because like, you know, social's my second, so I do. But it was just more of just like, I don't know, this house doesn't really like give me anything. I know a lot of fives like, oh, I go home to rejuvenate. That's not me. Like me rejuvenating is being alone in Times Square steps, just sitting alone around a bunch of people. So going home by myself and rejuvenating, that's terrible. That's like when my mind's racing, like Keith was saying. That's when my mind is racing and I need to like work out or something.
Yeah, it's a lot of similar things for me, Travis. Again, the self-pres is the third of mine. And there are parts of it I feel like I do reasonably well. I take pretty good care of myself physically, and I resourced in terms of health, but it is the things that are growing areas for me are my space and sometimes my time. For me, that comes across with time. I always assume I have enough time to do the 10 things that I want to do and never factor in, well, the first one actually I'm going to love. And if I've got, 3 hours to do 10 things, I'm going to spend 2.5 hours on the first one. And then there's no way I'm going to do the other 9 in the last half hour. But even until like 2 hours and 58 minutes, I'll somehow think I'm going to get all these things done in that amount of time. And then my space, I think it has been a while, but when I graduated from college and got my first apartment, it didn't matter to me that, I had a mattress that was on the floor. Like I bought an unfinished dresser, like, oh, it's cheaper and you can finish it yourself. Like I've had that dresser for 35 years and we never finished it. Like, why bother to finish it? It does what it has to do. It's just got to hold clothes. Like, I don't really care what it looks like.
Exactly.
I would have people over to my house and it wouldn't occur to me, oh, like the dishes are supposed to match or there's supposed to be enough chairs. It's like, no, like I want the people, like we'll get together in whatever space.
Yeah.
I don't care about that. I want the relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so well articulated. Like this explains so much of what the social sexual mindset, how it plays itself out versus like sexual self-pres mindset, which would have a little bit more attention to things like the domain, the home, the things that are in the physical realm a little bit more. So, yeah.
And I'm trying to grow in the sense of the home, particularly, and the way I kind of think my way into this. My wife, as I said, is social, but she's social self-pres. And so I find if I think about our home, that's a way to fuse with my wife. Like she values that a lot. Having a space that looks good and, doing things to our house is important to her. And so if I focus on that, then we connect, we fuse in that area. If my wife was also self-pres third, I don't know what our house would look like, but we would have a lot of people over and it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. This is fascinating. So this has been very helpful to understand how this works itself out and how different it is for, Karina, even you and Keith. Lots of similarities between all four of you. But then when it comes to this dimension as the third, and also, where your attention goes, there are some unique differences that start to show up. The sexual self-pres will have a bit more attention to the physical. So as you're hearing Stephen, I'm curious from you, Karina and Keith, how different that might be for you.
The one thing is my home. I used to work in interiors. I've always had a really nice stylized home. I like the way things look. I like the way I put myself together. I like the way my home is put together. Yeah, so that there is that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And Keith, you were saying when COVID hit, we were not unprepared.
No, we were not one of the ones getting 100 cans of cat food tuna because that was what was there, and dumping it in the cart. My social is dead last. I think I relate a lot to what Karina says about, I have to really put a lot of energy into interacting with people and reading people because it really does not come naturally. Having conversations at a dinner table is very distressing to me because there's 7 different things going on at once and I'm trying to pay attention to all of them. But I also found that, believe it or not, cooking helps because it allows me to have interactions, but I'm also doing something else at the same time. So I can do the hi, how are you? I can relate. I can do the surface level interaction, but I'm also doing something else at the same time. So it limits the energy and the resources that I have to put out there. So it does something for the group, but I can also hide away and I can also take care of myself. It allows me to be alone while also being part of the group.
Yeah,
I can relate with that. I feel like for me as a 5 in my social being neutral, the way I like to be alone in a group is by conducting the group itself. So like putting out like an interesting question while I'm with the group, like, hey, like, you ever thought about this? And like, oh, like this person hasn't talked yet. Like, what do they think? But they'll never hear what I really think, like, per se, because I'm not interested in being part of the group. That sounds exhausting. I just would like to just guide and conduct it.
That's interesting, Travis. I sort of a similar thing for me when I'm in a group. People will come away from that interaction with me thinking that I really agreed with whatever they were saying. And I may actually think the opposite of what they said, but I wanted them to feel connected. I wanted them to feel a part of it. I draw them out and know how to ask good questions. But it doesn't even matter sometimes in those settings if no one asks me anything. Like, I just want other people to feel a sense of connection.
Yeah, I've watched this happen. I can't tell you how many times. I've got a guy that he's a 5 playing racquetball with, and there was a guy that was talking politics to him, and he was saying, "Oh, interesting. So you think this?" And I knew his political position was way opposite of that guy. and he comes away from that. I said, "You didn't agree with anything he was saying, did you?" And he's like, "Oh, no, I think the guy's nuts." But he says, it's respect, and it's just a conversation, and it's just interesting to me, and I can listen to anything anybody says and be okay. And it's just remarkable that you 5s can really do that and not be so personally invested in that conversation. Of course, the low side is you can be completely absent from that as well. But the high side is that you can give people a lot of space to be who they are and show genuine interest in them, so they feel heard and understood. So that's a real strength of the 5.
And I would add to that, especially on the politics topic, it's not like you're going to change their mind anyway. So why argue? What's the point?
Why use the energy?
Why use the energy?
Yeah.
Just let them think they're wonderful and move on.
Yeah. Well, listen, you folks have brought it today. Thank you so very much. Excellent insight in a understanding. It helped me to learn so much more about you and the way the 5 works and the sexual instinct, and how that plays itself out through the 5. So big, huge thanks to each of you for opening up your hearts with us, your minds, and for all this time that you've invested into this. I really deeply appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree so much.
Enjoyable.
I agree. This has been such a gift, and you have really expanded our knowledge to my Enneagram teacher actually referred to as the rarest of types, thought that she'd only met a couple. And so this has been just an incredible gift for you to share this nuance that it is really underrepresented in the Enneagram world. So thank you so much for literally contributing to Enneagram knowledge on the whole by sharing your own story and your own journey. So I appreciate it so much, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
So thank you so much for joining us. And before I close this out, I want to remind you can take our free instincts test at www.theartofgrowth.org. You can also find out about all of our coaching programs there. Follow us on Instagram at Art of Growth, and make sure you are subscribed to keep up on this wild growth ride we are on. And if you leave us a review on iTunes, it really helps the algorithm that allows more people to discover this work. But for now, my friends, may you remember that even in the mundane, that you are a creature of magic and wonder, that there is a fire and a beauty to you that cannot be squelched, and that has been placed in you for your own enjoyment and pleasure. And may you feel resourced in joy today. Grace and growth, my friends.